Good morning from the Port of Los Angeles, and welcome to the first of our 2023 media briefings. I'm Philip Sanfield, the Port's Communications Director, and as always, it's my pleasure to introduce Port of Los Angeles Executive Director Gene Soroka. Greetings, Gene.
Hello, Philip, and welcome, everyone. Remarkably, this kicks off our fourth year of hosting these monthly briefings. And I'm so appreciative to the many of you here who have joined us month after month. The purpose of these briefings has always been to provide you with the latest data and trends coming out of the Port of Los Angeles, as well as the maritime industry. We're also committed to answering your questions with candor and transparency. So to that end, we'll start today with the latest cargo data and some context as to what's driving those numbers. After that, we'll welcome our guest, Princess Cruises President John Paget. With the cruise industry bouncing back and plans to expand that market here in LA, I look forward to his perspective. Lastly, as always, we'll leave plenty of time to address your questions.
Gene, let's start by throwing back to January of 2022, which was our best start ever. A lot has changed since then. How did we begin this year, and how's the first quarter looking?
Philip, as expected, January was soft. We moved 726,000 20-foot container units, 16% off last year's record pace. Imports landed at 372,000 TEUs. While that's a 13% year-on-year drop, it is a 6% increase over the previous month. We can attribute that mini bump to cargo owners who pushed their product here ahead of the Lunar New Year holidays. On the export side, we processed 103,000 TEUs. That's a 2.5% gain over last year, but still 22% off our all-important 5-year average. And empties came in at 251,000 TEUs, a 26% decline due to the slowing demand for containers in Asia. With this slowdown in cargo, we're now keeping a close eye on our vessel utilization rates. For example, during the first 6 months of 2022, ships came into LA pretty much full. This past month, however, we worked the same number of vessels as last January, but ships arrived with about 16% less cargo. That kind of statistic, combined with the 17 canceled sailings that we saw in January, tells us that we can expect more blank sailings in the weeks and months ahead. And overall, it's another indicator of the slowdown in trans-Pacific trade. Looking into February, we'll see a significant volume decline and a softer market heading into quarter two. Please keep in mind there are several contributing factors. First is Lunar New Year. Many facilities had extended closures, in some cases up to 30 days, so cargo just isn't moving. Second, warehouses here are still full, with the U.S. inventory sales ratio at 1.35. While the ratio is off all-time highs, it's still elevated. And that ratio is so important. It's the amount of inventory on hand compared to the net sales and how quickly that turn is taking place. That's why our inboxes are getting slammed every day with deep discount messages from retailers. They're focused on moving product, and if you're like me, you're still buying. Third, with interest rates on the rise and the latest inflation figure a bit higher than expected at 6.4%, we're all coping with economic uncertainty. That said, based on our forecasting models and conversations I'm having within the industry, we'll likely see numbers improve in the second half of this year. Of course, that coincides with more traditional peak season, the arrival of fall fashion, back to school, and early year-end holiday cargo. So while last year we saw strong volumes in the first 6 months, 2023 is shaping up to be a more robust setting in the back half of the year.
Gene, there's been a lot of discussion about the shift of cargo to the East and Gulf ports. What's your perspective, and will this cargo come back?
Philip, since 2002, the West Coast share of the Trans-Pacific trade has declined from 80% down to 56%. And right here at home in the San Pedro Bay, that share of import volume has dropped from a robust 50% of our nation's boxes down to 33%. So let's be clear, this cargo shift isn't new. It started more than 20 years ago. Cargo owners and decision makers tell us we're too expensive, overregulated, and have complicated labor issues. Meanwhile, East and Gulf Coast ports have hired switched-on leadership, aligned with policymakers, and they partnered together state to state with elected officials going to D.C. to get money for infrastructure projects. Between 2010 and 2020, we got left behind on federal investment here along the West Coast. East and Gulf Coast ports received more than $11 billion compared to just more than $1.2 billion invested in West Coast ports during that 10-year span. And the early take on the bipartisan infrastructure bill? 2 projects for the West Coast compared to more than 30 for the East and Gulf Coast ports. Money is going to both battleground and red states. It's not coming to where the cargo flows. We must focus on alignment with policymakers when looking at how and where to invest so that the American taxpayers receive their greatest return. Los Angeles should be at the top of the list. On the regulatory side, we need to focus all of our efforts on accelerating the clean technology and finding the investment streams to make that happen sooner rather than later. And finally, on the labor side, we all know we need this collective bargaining agreement in place quickly. Cargo owners have said that they want certainty, even though the boxes are moving through LA without problems. Let's take this issue out of the equation. We have the capacity now, and although some of that cargo may be lost for good, we're ready for a united stakeholder effort to unlock new levels of service and value here at the Port of Los Angeles.
Thanks, Gene. So let's switch gears and focus on another important line of our business, the cruise industry. Gene, tell us a little bit about our guest today.
My pleasure, Philip. John Paget is the president of Princess Cruises and chief experience and innovation officer for its parent company, Carnival Corporation. JP, as he's known to us in the industry, oversees a fleet of 15 modern cruise ships that visit more than 330 destinations around the world. JP is known for his game-changing strategies that fuse creative, technology, and operations. For example, he's the innovator behind the Ocean Guest Experience platform that effectively transforms a Princess ship into a floating smart city. This industry is such an important line of business to the entire LA region. Every cruise ship that calls here means more than $1 million to our local economy. And we're projecting a $250 million economic impact right here in 2023. JP, thanks for joining us from Fort Lauderdale, Florida today. Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Certainly appreciate it, Gene.
JP, 2020 and 2021 were tough. But the cruise industry has bounced back with a roar in 2022. What did you learn from those past experiences during the pandemic, and how are things shaping up for the future?
Hey, there couldn't be something more tough on any industry than the pandemic's impact on the cruise industry. And what we learned was take care of your fundamentals and take care of what's most important. And for Princess Cruises, what's most important is our crew. Incredible. We went to great lengths to make sure they were cared for, taken care of, transported back to their home countries, and then back to us once we restarted. Our guests stayed engaged with our guests throughout the entire pandemic to make sure they stayed connected with us, and we took care of all those disruptions and vacations. And finally, our assets, meaning our ships. Our ships, the Carnival Corporation continued to invest in Princess ships, keeping them top quality. So now, post-pandemic, Princess Cruises come back with the best crew, great guests, and an incredible ship. So we're totally prepared to grow into the future and partner with LA.
JP, the smart ship concept that you've created to enhance the guest experience has been transformative. Tell us a little bit about how it works and what the response has been so far.
Well, I can tell you that a Princess cruise ship is the most advanced smart city in the world. We've heard that term where you have sensors and connections, but on a Princess ship, every guest, every crew member completely connected ubiquitously across the ship, all to focus on enabling a personalized experience. It's hassle-free, so we can maximize the value of that guest experience. And people from all over the world, all different industries, come to Princess to see how we do it, because it is a model for the future that we pioneered in between 2017 and 2020, and now it's across our entire fleet and just making an incredible impact. When people go home, they're like, what happened? Oh, I'm not on a Princess ship. I have to do things. Whereas on a Princess ship, everything just happens to you. It's like you're going to your grandmother's for dinner. You know, you get personalized greetings. You have no hassle, no frustration on payment. Your food is exactly what you want, any place you want. If you want it on the couch or on the back porch, it just shows up. Princess is the ultimate in a large-scale smart city, all built around maximizing the value for our guests through an amazing guest experience.
That truly is outstanding. Our brands go a long way back, from that iconic 1970s TV show, The Love Boat, which was filmed right here at our port on the Pacific Princess, to the millions of cruisers who launch their getaways out of Los Angeles today. Tell us about your plans here in LA now and into the future.
Well, I think your point can't be understated. One could argue, because it's truly a fact, that the combination of Princess Cruises and the Port of LA started mainstream cruising. Cruise ships existed, but bringing it to the mainstream was LA's platform in the world. And it wasn't just the port, but it was the entire LA Hollywood community and Spelling Entertainment that took the elegance, the intrigue of cruise and brought it to everyone. And then that set the platform for the entire industry. So LA, essentially, with us, started the mainstream cruise industry and couldn't be more appreciative. It's still in our DNA. We still have the Love Boat in our DNA, and most certainly, being a hometown cruise line to LA, we are passionate about the Port of LA.
Tremendous. And the Port of LA has just issued a draft RFP for the build out of another cruise terminal at the Outer Harbor, as well as the redevelopment of our existing World Cruise facility. JP, let's pull back the curtain for just a moment. Can you share a little bit about your interest in this project and where it's going to take us?
Look, half of our fleet is home porting in LA half the year, and we visit over 330 destinations around the world. So LA is the host of our Mexican Classic Riviera itineraries, our access to South America, Antarctica, Hawaii, as well as the exotic itineraries down into the Pacific, as well as our repositioning up into Alaska for the summer. And so having LA have world-class facilities, when compared to all the other facilities in the world, there's no reason they should not have the best of the best. And from a Princess standpoint, being the hometown cruise line, being partners with LA, we want our guests to have an amazing experience and know when they come to the Port of LA that they are getting the best of the best from a cruise experience and facilities from around the world. So for us, it's super important. We actually have our latest brand new ship, Discovery Princess. We initiated her sailings out of the Port of LA, and we actually did her first embarkation on the Outer Harbor where that future terminal will be. Unfortunately, we did it under tents, but it was like having a yacht without the house. We have amazing assets. There's an amazing location. It should be an epic experience for our guests, and I think your vision for what it can be, we are certainly looking to partner with you to bring that to fruition.
Oh, thank you, JP. Some really great insights on an important segment of our business that deserves so much more discussion across our port community. Please stay with us for just a couple more minutes because we've got questions coming up next from the media.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you, JP. So let's take the cruise-related questions first, and then we'll follow up with supply chain topics. To the media, if you haven't asked a question in advance and you'd like to do so, please use the Q&A box below and make sure to include your name and affiliation. Let's start with Laura Curtis from Bloomberg. This is for both Gene and JP. So maybe Gene, you can take the LA perspective, and JP, cruise industry and Princess. What kind of growth do you expect in cruises and passengers for 2023? Gene?
This is super exciting, and Laura, thanks for joining us once again. By the end of this fiscal year, which marks out on June 30th, we're expecting to cross the 1 million cruise passenger mark. That'll be the best in a number of years here at the Port of LA. In 2023 specifically, we're going to build on that record year of port calls and see about 250 calls here in Los Angeles during this calendar year. And the growth and interest with the Outer Harbor RFP I just mentioned has folks from all over the world talking to us about that guest experience. LA is the largest drive market in the country, meaning that with more than 20 people living in the Southern California region, you can get in your car in the morning, drive down to the port, enjoy a nice meal, walk along our promenade, and then embark on one of these beautiful Princess ships and sail the high seas. Just a tremendous time in our history of working together with Princess and so many others. JP?
Well, I couldn't agree with everything you say more than that. LA being a drive market to great port facilities onto our beautiful ships. I mean, that is what it's all about, the best in vacations. And I'll tell you a point that most people don't realize about Princess is a global cruise line, as I mentioned, servicing 330 destinations around the world. But not all the world is equal when in its recovery from the COVID pandemic. And so Asia is still very complicated in the cruise space, and we've repositioned those assets back to North America, and we're seeing very nice growth in all those, and we're driving a key driver behind that growth right there in LA. And so from my standpoint, having that drive market, our hometown guests, our great ships, and the great port all working synergistically together, it can secure that growth for many years to come, because our assets are mobile and they will stay where the guest volume and demand is at. And so the more demand out of LA, the more of our assets will be there, and the more that we will be leveraging the Port of LA.
Thank you both. JP, this next question is a follow-up for you from Ann Kalash at Seatrade News. She's asking if there's any more detail or regarding Princess's interest and approach to the port's draft RFP for another cruise facility here in Los Angeles.
Well, I'll say that there is no doubt that LA, the Port of Los Angeles, needs a new terminal on these locations. And I think the collaboration between the city, the port, and Princess Cruises working together, as well as the other brands of Carnival Corporation, to align behind getting that commitment will be a wonderful thing. To me, it can't come soon enough. So we should really focus on being efficient, being effective, listening to our guests, partnering together, and getting that facility to reality as soon as reasonably possible.
Thank you. Gene, this next question is on the cruise-related industry and the waterfront, and this one's for you. It's from Donna Littlejohn of the Southern California News Group here. Is there any determination whether the USS Iowa will relocate down to the San Pedro Slip, making more room for the cruise ships at the World Cruise Facility?
Hi, Donna. Good to have you with us once again this month. All of this is under serious discussion. It probably will cost about $20 million to move the Iowa, for example, down to the SP or San Pedro Slip. That would include the physical moving, the dredging, and putting that great vessel into a stable environment. It will also open up other opportunities along the waterfront and really connect that work that we have today with the cruise industry to retail, dining, entertainment options, and that great USS Iowa. The Iowa is also looking to build the Surface Navy Museum on the ship, along with the Pierside Building and Park. State of California has committed $6.7 million towards this build out. So we're all investing, from the Harbor Department to the state and other private sector financial opportunities that Jonathan Williams has been leading in his fundraising effort for some time now. So truly is an opportunity for us, but it opens up a world of opportunity along this waterfront and choices that we have now to bring even more folks down to visit the Port of LA. Thanks, Donna.
JP, a couple questions have come in regarding the number of cruise passengers on a ship. When it comes to Princess's approach, what is that sweet spot in terms of how many passengers are boarding for a cruise?
Well, as most people know, it's interesting in the cruise industry, the ships get bigger and bigger and bigger because they carry so many world-class amenities, from the incredible hotels, the casinos, the recreation facilities, the spas, the pools. They're truly incredible. But with large-scale ships, your personalization reduces because of the law of large numbers. There's more people. A lot of people still love small ships because whereas they don't have all the amenities, they have that personalization that makes you feel special. Princess Cruises is the only brand in the world, the only cruise brand that actually has both. So we're a large ship cruise line that has all of those amenities, but we can deliver that personalized interaction of a yacht class level experience because of our fully connected smart city. So we're unique in that position in the market to both offer maximum amenities, maximum personalization on a very efficient platform.
Great. There's one more question for you, JP, currently, and that is regarding what initiatives are Princess or the industry as a whole taking to reduce its carbon footprint?
Well, we're continually focused on environmental impact. We're very focused on sustainability on all dimensions. What we do from an environmental system standpoint on the ships, I would encourage anyone to come see, is truly spectacular processes across the board, from recycling, water processing, energy management, etc. But I will say that we watch our speeds, we watch our itinerary optimization to keep speeds and loads down. We are also introducing the LNG platform into Princess. Carnival Corporation's been a big supporter of the next generation of ships being LNG platformed. We are taking receipt of our first LNG ship, the Sun Princess, in January 2024, and they are substantially more carbon efficient, not carbon neutral, but carbon efficient. And that's just another example of what we're going to do to continue to focus on sustainability as a whole, as well as minimizing our environmental impact from an energy management perspective.
Very good. Thank you. That concludes our cruise questions. Back to you, Gene.
Thanks, Philip. JP, this has been great. Thanks for coming on, and I look forward to seeing you here in LA very soon.
Thanks, Gene. Looking forward to it.
Okay, let's switch over to some cargo-related questions. The first one is from Colin Campbell of Supply Chain Dive. Gene, the California and Harbor Trucking Associations recently wrote to the ports of LA and Long Beach, the executive directors, requesting a single appointment system for both port terminals. What are your thoughts on that request?
Thanks, Colin. Appreciate you joining. We love it. We've been talking about this for years, since we first started with the Port Optimizer, our nation's port community information sharing system of the first generation and now still only. We've been talking about how we need to squeeze efficiencies out of our marine terminals when it comes to the truck business. About 2/3 of all of the containers that move in and out of the Port of Los Angeles move by truck. Yet, it's one of the areas we have to improve. More than 50% of our truck gates go unused every day for a variety of reasons: operational, disposition, the way the supply chains move, and how inventory carrying costs look to importers and exporters. If we can improve this area by 5, 10, 15 percentage points, we'll really start to see the efficiency gains that we need. But here at the Port of Los Angeles, we've been ready, and we've been talking about this for some time. We need a united front I also mentioned in my State of the Port address that we have a module ready to go here in Los Angeles, and we want others to join us. Thanks for the question, Colin. Appreciate you joining again today.
Gene, a few questions coming in about the labor talks. Laura Curtis is from Bloomberg again is asking, are you still hearing from shippers concerned about potential disruptions due to labor talks, and have there been any disruptions?
No disruptions to date. Both the ILWU and the Employers Association, the PMA, put out multiple media press releases, jointly signed, saying they would not strike, they would not lock out. To my knowledge, President Biden was the first sitting president to visit with both sides and their top negotiators on the USS Iowa back on June 10th to encourage these guys and ladies to stay at the table and work through their bargaining issues. United States Labor Secretary Marty Walsh has been in constant contact, working very hard to develop strong business relationships with both the dock workers and the Employers Association. And we haven't seen any change in productivity. The rank and file that go out there every day, our neighbors, our friends, are on the job, moving all the cargo they can through the port. And realistically speaking, that message has got to continue to get out as the ground truth to importers and exporters across the country. Laura, you've heard me say I'm crisscrossing the nation, trying to share those important updates with decision makers on both sides of the ledger. Yet there still is trepidation, and I'm sensitive to that. There are many transportation managers that yet couldn't go back to their boss for a third straight year and say, I got our cargo stuck in the jaws of congestion out in California. Maybe history will say there was some overcorrection here. The combination of that and the hand-wringing about the economy has got us turned a little bit sideways when it comes to the supply chain. And that's why I said, to meet the criticism, to meet the conjecture that's put out there, we've got to get this collective bargaining agreement done and remove that from the discussion. Let's focus on what we can do to deliver value, make sure we are sharp on our cost, bring certainty back to this program that we have here, and let's have a more practical conversation about how we're going to reach zero emissions, where it's not debilitating to companies or leaves the workforce behind. There's much more ahead for us, but we're tackling it and we're up front every time, just like we are here on our monthly press conferences. Again, Laura, thanks for joining.
One last follow-up from Laura, and it does combine the previous topic. Is the push to expand cruise traffic here at the port a response to some of the cargo business shifting eastward?
Well, it's part of what keeps me running to work every single day, Laura. We've got 8 distinct lines of business. And while the shipping sector makes up about 75 to 80% of our top line revenue, each one of these segments is so important to the people that we serve. In fact, with respect to the RFP on the outer cruise terminal project that we've envisioned, that was supposed to go out to the public before COVID-19. And then obviously with various parts of our economy and our own private lives shuttered during the pandemic, the cruise industry was hit extremely hard. So it wasn't an appropriate time to go out looking for investment, partners, construction, and design of this location until we knew what the return of cruising could be and what an outlook short-term, intermediate, and long-term would be by experts like JP. So we're going to continue to push in all these areas, whether it's bulk, liquid bulk, our steel business, in addition to the visitor serving and entertainment sector, the automotive business, along with others. So it's really important we keep all of these 8 lines moving forward, and we thought it was an appropriate time now to make sure that others got into this conversation. We need big thinkers around the table to help drive this part of our business. And with 250 cruise calls expected this year, that'll be a big boost to our local businesses, restaurants, shops, our hotels, and others here who really count on that traffic. Thanks again.
Thank you, Gene. We're going to combine questions from Dan Ronan at Transport Topics and Greg Miller at Freightways. They both cite the fact that you've talked about a contract deal perhaps getting done in the February-March timeframe. So the two questions here: when do you currently think a labor deal will get done at this point? And have you told the leadership of both parties on the negotiating sides of your concerns about cargo erosion?
Absolutely. These are the discussions we have nearly every day with leadership of the PMA and the ILWU. Both sides are keenly aware of that lost cargo and want to rally with us to earn it back and grow with organic market growth. But as I've said before, collective bargaining is hard work. Not only do we need a coastal framework, but there are also 29 local agreements up and down the West Coast. And by and large, these two sides haven't negotiated in depth for about 8 years, if you'll remember. So that work has to be done for the generation that's on the docks today and for the next generation of workers. The companies have to have certainty so they can come back and invest and continue to drive business through this gateway. I believe that both sides and us here in Los Angeles all know what's at stake. With respect to timing, we're at the outer edges of what historically has been the farthest reaching end of negotiations like this between these two sides. It may not get done in February or March, but I'm still pretty confident that we'll see some real progress here in the springtime. And keep in mind, as we have the annual Trans-Pacific Maritime Conference coming up, kicking off at the end of this month, first week of March, this is a real soft opening of contract discussions between cargo owners and shipping lines. We don't want to give anyone excuses to contract for cargo moving in other geographies or other ports. We've got to give confidence to these negotiators at the table that they can get the job done the right way. And we also have to give confidence to business that this is the gateway of choice. But again, to date, no disruptions, working with the rank and file every day, seeing many of our neighbors every day. These folks are going to work. They've got a lot at stake as well. Appreciate the question, both Dan and Greg. Thanks again for joining.
One more related to this topic, Gene. It's from Bill Mongaluzzo at Journal of Commerce. You've touched on it in different answers here, but maybe you'll want to weave it together one more time. What is the port doing to eliminate or reduce further erosion of market share?
Bill, this is again why we run to work every day. I'm crisscrossing the country, working with our overseas shipping lines and marine terminal operators, talking to the cargo owners to make sure they understand what we have here. There's latent capacity, cargo is moving, there's no disruption by dock workers. Again, the ILWU has not gone on strike since the early 1970s under a completely different set of circumstances with different leadership in a different generation. The folks here want to do the work. The 22,000 longshore members up and down the coast want to get a new contract done so they can provide for their families. And as I've said earlier, it is likely that some of this cargo will continue to stick. For policymakers, for the C-suite in the private sector, and so many others that work with us, this market share along the West Coast has gone from a robust 80% down to 56% today. And I've laid out all the reasons in very clear form once again today. We've got to unite. When states along the East Coast put together coalitions of 8 United States senators to campaign for investment and funding, not just from the federal government, but to encourage the private sector to invest in their ports, creating business-friendly regulations, we can take a lesson from that out here in California. And we can focus in a state where 30% of the workforce works in the transportation sector. There's a lot here. We'll continue to improve our value and service. We know where the blind spots are. We know now how to see around corners, and it's our job to keep upping our game. We got to remove this labor question from the discussion so we can focus on how we move this cargo, what's needed from an infrastructure standpoint, how digital can really make that transformation that we all believe, and how this becomes the gateway of choice once again. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate your constant involvement in working with us.
Thank you, Gene. Sarah Zimmerman from Supply Chain Dive is asking what kind of cargo has shifted to the Eastern Gulf? Is it primarily ag? Is it auto, retail, or just cargo in general?
Sarah, it's just about everything. Again, we were clipping out at record volume for 25 straight months. The cargo numbers were unbelievable. And you look at this wide-ranging selection that we have moving through Los Angeles on a regular basis. You've got 200,000 companies that call the Port of LA home for imports and exports every year. And no one company, even the largest, has more than a 5% market share. So the inability for small to medium-sized companies to get their cargo moving during the fourth quarter of 2021 left an indelible impression on those folks. They had to find better ways to do business. The larger folks have an easier lever to pull in shifting cargo. They could do it vessel by vessel in Asia and point towards the Suez or Panama canals for discharge and movement onwards. Once cargo finds that spot and it becomes predictable, a vessel arrival, discharge, onward carriage, it's pretty hard to turn around. And that's what we're up against every single day. It's going to take more than talk. It's going to take action from leadership across a variety of segments that I've just mentioned. We've got to get on it.
Next question is from Jeff Berman, Logistics Management. Do you see a recession this year? And if so, what would that mean for U.S.-bound imports since consumers have returned to service spending such as travel and dining?
I really don't see a recession. This is an economic equation, Jeff, that we haven't seen. I think on the last call I mentioned that I've been through 7 economic shocks during my career. They've looked different, but this one is really unique in so much as the numbers that have come out this week. While the inflation number at 6.4% did not decline as some experts had thought, retail sales was up 3% in January coming off the holidays. And this morning's announcement of manufacturing orders popping 1% in the month of January also got some people pretty excited. We still have 11 million jobs open, the lowest unemployment since 1969, and a real need to look at these various sectors. While we've seen the tech industry laying off maybe now 150,000 people, other industries like manufacturing and supply chain are clamoring to get great talent on board in a variety of skill sets. Now, apparently, there are a lot of other people that run banks and used to be Treasury secretaries talking about recession in early 2022. Then it was the latter part. Then it was 23. Now it's the back end of this year or maybe 24. I look at some of these statistics very closely and on a daily basis. Right now, with 70% of our GDP being you and me buying all these goods, I still see us remaining pretty strong. Now, a downturn may be shallow, it may be short-lived. By some, the definition may be recession. I just don't see it in a traditional way where it will hit the American family and the jobs in a broad-based case. We'll keep watching. This is not something that we dismiss or are flippant about, but I like our chances here, not only in Los Angeles when it comes to international trade, but for the U.S. economy as a world leader. Thanks, Jeff.
Gene, Chris Adler from KFI Radio here in Los Angeles is asking, is the Port of LA currently operating at the same rate as it was pre-pandemic? Or if not, what's the overall status?
Chris, you'll have to define rate for me. We're down about 20% in cargo volume from where we were during all of this COVID-induced import buying surge based on our insatiable demand as American consumers. I look at the stats on how we move the cargo, the hammerhead cranes, the trucks moving in and out. Our dwell times are back to what normal used to look like before COVID-19 and this surge. The number of containers idling on our docks looks really good to me and normal, well off what we saw back in the third and fourth quarters of 2021 when we had to threaten the industry with a fine on long aging containers. So I think all those productivity numbers that I look at as a longtime member of this industry look really good. We've got extra capacity. We can take more cargo. We've got to make sure that we address those 3 items that I outlined here, again, with full force. There's no shying away from stuff. People have opinions. They also have the control of the cargo. And those are the people that we have to convince that they've got value, that we're not going to over-regulate. We're going to be very pragmatic about this, and we're going to make sure that that labor discussion is out of the equation. We're going to get those folks to make sure that they have the confidence in this great workforce here in Southern California that hasn't let them down before as we moved all this cargo during the past 3 years. Thanks.
Couple more questions left, two of them on the same topic. With the current political tensions high over the suspected Chinese surveillance balloon, do you see that impacting global trade?
Oh, the surveillance issue is unnerving, however it comes out to be. But the bottom line, in my view, is that the two largest economies in the world have to be able to trade together. I'll leave politics to those in other capacities. U.S. imports of China goods last year grew by 6%, even as it was so topsy-turvy. And that's close to the all-time record set back in 2018. The U.S. trade deficit was at a record high, up 12% last year, and it's nearly $1 trillion now. That's why we've been saying for some time, we really have to have a focus on the American exports and start pushing out. We may never be one for one on container trade. I fully understand that. But experts like Secretary Gina Raimondo at the U.S. Department of Commerce, who we met with just yesterday, has said that this lack of exports and the widened trade gap are both drags on U.S. economic output, defined to us as GDP. So we've got to keep pumping on everything we can do to build up that connectivity for the American exporter in manufacturing, agriculture, and other sectors. And please remember, those jobs, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, pay better than in other segments. So as we're continuing to try to attract, recruit, and retain talent, these are real opportunities for the American economy. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Gene. Last question here from Donna Littlejohn at the SoCal News Group. There have been many reports of Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh leaving his post soon. Will that impact the contract negotiations going on with the longshoremen?
Thanks, Donna. And there's only one report missing, and that's U.S. Labor Secretary Marty Walsh saying he's leaving his post. But if that is inevitable, the National Hockey League gets one of the great men here that can help that organization as well. I think we're on really firm footing. The folks that work at the Labor Department have institutional knowledge like no other. The Deputy Secretary of Labor, Julie Su, was formerly the California Labor Secretary, and in that case knows both sides here in our labor negotiation very well. Both sides, the PMA, the Employers Association, the dock workers, the ILWU. I don't think we'll miss a beat. And behind the scenes, the Labor Department, including the Secretary and Deputy Secretary, have been working those business relationships since they took the oaths of office. We'll continue to move forward very well. And if, in fact, the Secretary is leaving, we know he'll do a great job, and he has made also a great impression here in all of us in the maritime sector. There'll be more to follow. Thanks, Donna.
Gene, that's all the questions. I'll turn it back to you.
Great, and thanks, Philip. I'd like to briefly share in closing some of the priorities I outlined at our recent State of the Port address. In 2023, we were focused on 3 areas. First, building back that market share and developing career paths. Second, furthering sustainable zero-emission operations. And finally, enhancing the quality of life for all of our port communities. Rebuilding market share means continuing to innovate. This year, we're introducing several new features to our Port Optimizer platform. They include better lines of sight for exporters, a new interface that shares data on Southern California warehouse conditions, and, as we've just discussed, that port-wide truck reservation system. We also have nearly $1 billion in infrastructure projects lined up and ready to go. While we've received some key federal and state grants, we still need our fair share to maintain and elevate the port's world-class infrastructure. On the career advancement front, we're collaborating with several entities to roll out a new workforce initiative that'll provide professional and economic opportunities for a broad range of jobs. This is in addition to the continued development of our Goods Movement Training Campus, a one-of-a-kind center that will upskill and reskill workers for port-related jobs. It'll also help the next generation of young folks, if they have an interest in working in this great port, the opportunity to find the front door. Meanwhile, we are leading the way on groundbreaking environmental initiatives. One highlight is the establishment of the green shipping corridors with the ports of Shanghai and Singapore. We've also introduced nearly 20 innovative programs to develop and deploy zero-emission equipment along with heavy-duty trucks here at the Port of Los Angeles. To further enhance quality of life in our port communities, we'll be completing significant infrastructure projects along the LA waterfront. One that I know everyone is looking forward to is this summer's debut of the $71 million Wilmington Waterfront Promenade. Each of these priorities contribute to our vision, what we've been calling the LA model, a sustainable port that delivers both economic benefit and a better quality of life for all. I look forward to sharing updates with you as we accomplish each of these objectives throughout the year. Thanks for joining us today. Take care, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you again right here next month.